Picture this, okay? You're sitting in a dead silent room. The clock is ticking loudly, your pencil's literally sweating in your hand, and you're staring down a piece of paper that supposedly dictates your entire future. We've all been there, right? It's this universal, incredibly frustrating shared stress. I mean, anyone who's ever sat through a standardized test has probably stared up at the ceiling at some point and thought, there has to be a better way to do this. And yet, generation after generation, the testing just keeps on going.
Which brings up a wildly fascinating paradox for this explainer. Think about it. If exams are really so deeply flawed, why does almost every single country on Earth still use them? We know they cause massive anxiety. We know they totally fail to capture a person's true potential. And we know they feel incredibly rigid. Yet they absolutely dominate the global educational landscape. So let's unpack exactly why that is.
Moving right into our first section on the universal exam standard, and really why the whole world tests us.
To truly wrap our heads around the absolute grip that testing has on global society, we kind of have to strip away our idealistic visions of what education should be. We need to look at the cold, hard realities of what running a country actually entails. You see, governments and institutions aren't choosing exams because there's some flawless educational ideal. No way. They choose them out of pure, unadulterated pragmatism. Under realistic conditions, exams are just the easiest system to actually execute while still appearing unbiased. They need a tool that works in the messy, real world, plain and simple.
Now, let's look at efficiency in surface fairness, or the sheer pragmatism of mass evaluation.
If you want to build a level playing field across a massively diverse population, your core philosophy basically has to be equality before scores. This is the exact engine behind giant standardized tests, like China's famous Gaokao. By using unified questions and incredibly strict grading standards, people from vastly different geographic regions and wealth brackets are competing under the exact same rules. Think about the alternatives for a second. Imagine a subjective interview where maybe the recruiter just doesn't vibe with your personality, or a recommendation letter that's totally based on who you know. An exam provides this powerful shield against all those subjective preferences. The score is the score. It provides a highly visible, surface-level fairness.
And this creates a massive operational difference. On the one hand, you have exams. They're unified, objective, and built for massive scale. Now, contrast that with the alternative methods, right? Interviews, recommendation letters, creative portfolios. These are highly subjective, deeply personal, and almost entirely unscalable. I mean, if you want to really deeply evaluate one single student, the individualized approach is absolutely amazing. But what happens when you need to evaluate an entire nation? Well, you run headfirst into an unyielding roadblock. Millions of students, sometimes tens of millions. When a country needs to screen talent from a pool of millions, all at the exact same time, that individualized approach completely collapses. It is practically impossible to do millions of deep personal interviews in a couple of weeks, so exams are essentially the ultimate efficiency tool for mass screening. Plus, once you build an exam system, the cost to run it is remarkably low, and you can replicate it endlessly. For governments and schools, this is a stable, controllable, and super cheap mechanism for evaluating the masses.
Let's trace this back to its industrial roots and look at the whole assembly line of education.
To really get why this infrastructure exists, we have to look backward. It's wild to think about, but the modern exam system perfectly mirrors a factory assembly line. It was originally designed to meet the massive economic demands of the industrial age. Suddenly, society needed massive amounts of standardized talent, basically workers who possessed a very specific, predictable baseline of knowledge. So education literally became a factory. First, you have a unified input where everyone learns the exact same curriculum. Then, a unified evaluation. Boom, the standardized test. And finally, a stratified output, where students are sorted into different tiers of the workforce based on their scores. It is the exact same logic as industrial manufacturing. But honestly, the roots go back way further than the Industrial Revolution. Take China's ancient Kozhu, or civil service examination system, for example. When a society uses exams to select its top talent for centuries, it creates what sociologists call path dependence. It's like a deep groove that gets worn into a road. Once a society habituates to screening people this way, the entire infrastructure, the culture, the societal expectations, they all crystallize right around it. The system constantly reinforces itself, making it almost impossible to just uproot it and replace it with something brand new.
Okay, so let's get into the true costs of testing and what this massive system is actively ignoring.
This brings us right back to that initial frustration we all felt in that dead, silent exam room. Because while this factory logic is brutally efficient, the system has a massive, glaring blind spot. Look, When you optimize an entire educational infrastructure purely for scale, standardization, and surface-level fairness, you inevitably sacrifice the more nuanced, beautiful elements of human potential. The factory model processes numbers perfectly, for sure, but it completely crushes individuality.
And the collateral damage here is stark. Standardized exams really only measure two things: your memory and your actual test-taking skills. That's pretty much it. Because of this, the system actively ignores creativity. It completely overlooks vital, real-world skills like communication and practical hands-on ability. And ultimately, it fundamentally twists the very purpose of education itself. Students stop learning to actually understand the world, and they start learning just for the exam. The end goal becomes the score rather than the knowledge.
Which brings us to our final section: future alternatives, dilemmas, and the actual price of holistic assessment.
Now, the world isn't blind to these flaws, obviously. Educational leaders across the globe are actively trying to shift the paradigm away from just pure memorization. Take project-based learning, or PBL. It's this super dynamic approach where students actually get out there and explore complex, real-world problems to gain deeper knowledge instead of just bubbling in a multiple-choice sheet. Alongside comprehensive assessments and personal portfolios, these diverse, holistic evaluation methods are currently being championed as the absolute ideal alternatives to rigid, standardized testing. They evaluate the whole student, not just their memory.
Here is where we have to pull the rug out a bit. These seemingly superior methods, they can't just replace exams tomorrow. Why? Because every single one of them comes with severe hidden risks. Project-based learning is incredibly complex and takes way too much time to accurately grade at scale. Personal portfolios, highly susceptible to subjective bias. By relying on heavy resources and subjective human judgment, these holistic methods risk introducing massive, systemic unfairness right back into the process. The crazy thing is, the very complexity that makes these alternative methods so amazing for individual development is exactly what threatens the operational fairness that the exam system was originally built to protect.
So this brings us to the ultimate crossroads of modern education. It's really not just a simple problem of good versus bad. It is a profound structural trade-off. In our pursuit of identifying and nurturing human talent, what are we ultimately willing to sacrifice? Do we sacrifice a comprehensive understanding of a student's true diverse abilities? Or do we sacrifice the absolute standardized fairness of the system? It is a heavy dilemma for sure, and it's definitely something to think about the next time you or someone you know sits down to take a test.